What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Existential Stoic Podcast, episode 54. Today's topic, Seasonal Depression User's Guide. STUG is the acronym for this one.
That is STUG. Yeah.
Yeah, when you're not feeling snug because of seasonal depression, we got the Seasonal Depression User's Guide, STUG. Now, this is a very apropos topic because it's the time of year when people start feeling it. The seasons are changing, the days are getting shorter.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you got the winter to get through, and who knows what else. You know,
winter,
summer's over.
Crappy weather. God,
yeah,
the light just deprivation. It just gets worse and worse as time goes on until you hit that pinnacle moment of the shortest day, right?
Yep.
And then it's an uptick from there.
Yeah, exactly. Get through Blue Monday in January, and then it's high flying. So, in that light, we decided to make a helpful video podcast for you guys, so that you can hopefully get through this season, make this season the best season ever. You know?
Yeah. Right.
Because everybody talks about seasonal depression. Everybody says they have seasonal depression, but there's no user's guide. So this episode will be your user's guide. It'll be how to get through. Now, we should just preface it with the caveat. Clearly, this isn't like in place of any type of help. So clearly go see a licensed professional. And if you are really depressed, there's always a suicide prevention hotline. So definitely use those resources, because there's no reason to, make a permanent decision on a temporary problem.
No, it absolutely isn't. They're supposed to be coming out with that 3-digit number soon too, eventually, for that. Wonder when that'll happen.
Yeah,
anyway.
Who knows? So that being said, seasonal depression. I've experienced it previously. You've experienced it previously. Many people have experienced it previously. I mean, yeah.
It's I think, it's funny. I think one of the things with it is too, like, at least personally, because I mean, I've definitely experienced it every year, and it's like, and it's, I don't know that it gets worse every year, but I think one of the things importantly too is like, it's getting through it. Like, instead of thinking of like, I'm not going to have it this year, or like, I'm going to do all this stuff to not, you're going to probably get it. I think if you like, I think at least in my experience, like, if you are susceptible to it, you're likely going to get it. This part of the year is just harder for whatever reason. And I think just admitting that is kind of helpful, at least for me, because I think, you're not trying to kind of like do something maybe impossible or get your expectations up and then have them crushed, and then it makes it worse, right? I think that does help.
Yeah, it's definitely a good point there, being able to acknowledge it, because like oftentimes it sneaks up on you. And that's when it's like invasive and really terrible, when it sneaks up on you and all of a sudden you don't realize it's just like the anxiety and the seasonal depression. All of a sudden you think your life is terrible. And like it'll sneak up. But when you're ready for it, when you're like, try and sneak up on me this time. Well, when you're ready for it, you can see it earlier on, and you can recognize all the resources that you have, the friends that you have, counseling that you have, medications if you need, light therapy, cold shower, like all these different things that you can do. You realize all these, your resourcefulness is there. You, however, can be ready for it so it doesn't surprise you.
Yeah, you can prepare yourself. It is crazy too how much, like, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, how much, how dramatically different the world seems when you feel depressed. Isn't it like insane? And then like, and the fact, like, I don't know why this surprised me the other day, but like, I was feeling down, and then it's like, then the next day I felt fine. And it's like the dramatic change in just like 24 hours. And it's amazing. And it also just shows you that it's all up here. It's all in your head. And I think that's why it's so hard sometimes to get through too, because you're your own worst enemy. If you feel that way, it seems impossible to think differently or see the world differently. And that is always a challenge.
And oftentimes it can come down to changing your headspace. Like they talk about that with psychedelics, how your headspace makes a big difference. And if you're not feeling great, change locations, change room, go outside, do different things like that. And that can even make a difference, because especially going outside, like this is the time of year when a lot of people don't want to go outside because it's cold or it's rainy or it's dark or whatever those things are. But actually forcing yourself to get out there, even though it's uncomfortable, Like, I think this is, at least for me, uh, being uncomfortable is one of the things that helps to deal with seasonal depression.
Yeah, it is.
And like one of the biggest impacts for me has been cold showers. Like, because in like historically, one of the ways that I've recognized the seasonal depression is just kind of like an anxiety, like almost a panic
Oh,
attack as
yeah,
to what's going
yeah,
to happen. And so as soon as that happens, like my go-to is cold water in my face.
yeah.
But
That helps though. It gets you. It
yeah.
really does shift. You can't help but keep thinking that way. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this. It's funny, but it's like the same principle you use with like a dog or something, right? It's like get them to like snap out of it and focus back on like what matters, right? I like
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking when coming up with this episode that like we should try and prioritize it in terms of like what are the most impactful things that people can do to
Ooh,
kind of make a difference in their life.
to actually be helpful, and not digress crazily. Yeah, that's a good
Right.
point. Um, I actually one of the things you said too was just going outside, and I think there is something I this there is something you can do I think to help with that too, which is I know at least for myself, a lot of times, it's freezing outside, it's getting colder. Sometimes there's dramatic shifts in temperature this time of year. So like it'll feel even, I think, colder than it actually is. Sometimes I think just having the appropriate clothing and like being able to actually like layer up so that it doesn't feel that way and you can enjoy the outdoors a bit more. You're more likely to spend time outside, you're more likely to get that sort of daylight if you can. And I think that helps immensely because I walk every morning at like between 6 and 7. At some point I'll take a walk, and as it gets colder it definitely gets harder, but if you just put on gloves, take a minute to put on gloves and do that stuff, it is a lot easier and you can enjoy it. And I think that does help a lot because you realize like, oh, maybe I just wasn't preparing enough before and like letting myself, kind of experience this. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point with preparing for it because a lot of people wait until seasonal depression hits to try and make all of these changes in their life. And that's like that's great, but
Yeah,
but it's better to
totally.
do all this to start doing all this stuff before it hits. So like just like you're saying how going outside every day you can get kind of used to it. I used to sit outside every morning with my dad. And like it was crazy because the dead of winter, it was like 0 degrees, and we'd both be sitting out there and we'd be laughing to each other. We're like, isn't it supposed to be cold out here? What's
Yeah.
going on? But it was because we sat out there for like a half an hour to an hour every day from the summer all the way to the winter. So like while it got colder, we were just getting used to it, and it really wasn't that big of a shift.
Well, it's one of those things too. I think we forget. It's like we're so spoiled with climate control these days. I mean, I how many people do you know that like before they leave in the morning when it's cold out, they click their car on so the heat kicks on, the heated seats are on, right? It's like you basically, you run out to your car for a minute in cold weather and then you're in this warm box again. And I think that, when you just live that way, you're never prepared for it. It always feels freezing. But spending some time out there, yeah, you just get used to it. And it's possible to get used to it over time. I always notice that every year when we get like a winter where it's like in the 20s for like a month, by the end of the month, you're used to it. It doesn't feel that bad anymore. And it's like, you've adapted. If we can adapt, you just got to force it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like getting used to the cold, getting some outdoor routines are important. I think
Oh,
another
yeah.
thing that we've talked about many, many times that's super important is the small delights. And this is basically
Oh,
just
God, yeah.
gratitude. But
Yeah.
what Danny and I found was there was this practice called the small delights, where every night before you go to sleep, you write down the 3 best parts of your day. And in the beginning, it was hard for both of us because
Oh, yeah.
we're like, but my life stinks. Like, what? There's nothing good. Blah, I don't have anything that I want. Elon Musk's a billionaire, and I'm not. Blah. So like
Yeah.
in the beginning,
It's horrible.
in the beginning, it was really tough. But after like a few days or a few weeks, we got better at it. And what we noticed was like a very quick improvement in our lives. And it wasn't that our actual life got any better. It was just that we got better at recognizing how awesome our life is that went unnoticed beforehand.
Yeah, you get better, and better at noticing the little things too that I think are the easiest ones to slip by, right? Like just like good conversation with friend, nice time spent with a loved one, whatever, good cup of coffee, whatever the hell it is, right? Those little things that are so easy to overlook when you're being negative and bitchy and, everything's down, right? And I think that is a good one. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I love
important.
what you say there with the coffee because like ever since starting doing the small delights, like I actually recognize that I'm having coffee. It's the craziest thing, but it makes it so much more enjoyable. Like there's sometimes like you see the pictures of like the coffee with the steam coming off of it in the
Yeah.
commercials or whatever, and you're like, oh, I wish I could have that moment. Well, like ever since I started doing the small delights, I have that moment every morning because
Yeah.
I'm more attuned to it and I get to enjoy it in the morning. And then also at night before I go to sleep, I get to enjoy it a second time as I write it down for the small delights.
Well, I think that, and that is like, I think that's our biggest, maybe one of our biggest faults is that we are not aware, we're not present, and we don't enjoy the things that we could enjoy that are like everyday pleasures that are, like, you always say too, every time you see a commercial or TV when somebody's reading with a hot cup of coffee or something, like, and they're all relaxed and looks, and it's like, you can do that. I do that all the time. It's like, but I don't always pay attention to how great it is. Or like, even like, like you were just saying, like actually enjoying the coffee. Most of the time we're rushing through eating. We rush through drinking, our beverages because we're trying to get to the next thing. We don't even experience the great food that we're eating, the great coffee we're having. We don't give ourselves a chance, like, or just like, especially with seasonal depression coming, right? Standing outside on a cold day with a hot cup of coffee, like there's almost nothing better, right? Because you get that warming feeling inside, but forcing yourself to be aware of it in the moment and then getting that second replay later is, yeah, it's undoubtedly one of the most helpful things.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, yeah.
Yeah, and with the gratitude, like you're saying, they're actually being grateful in the moment. So if you're
Yeah.
outside and you see a blue sky with some clouds in it, and it looks beautiful, actually saying, thank you, this is
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing too, I think, is like, and I know we say it a lot, but like, going outside without your phone, without a screen, and just like actually enjoying, reminding yourself that, hey, I'm alive and this is kind of awesome. And there's still something worth looking at here. There's still something that's pleasurable. I can just have this moment. I can take this walk. I can sit by this fire. I can do these things and actually enjoy it does a lot for our mental health, I think. Like a lot.
That's a really important point, what you just said there, is that anyone who doesn't know this yet, they have done positive correlation studies that the more time you spend in front of a screen, the less happy you are. So
Yeah.
so you need to audit your life. And if you're not happy, see how much time you're spending in front of a screen and do what you can to reduce that. Because that
Yeah.
alone will make one of the biggest differences in your life is getting rid of the screen and actually experiencing life.
It's funny, I think too. With this, I think you should mention, exercise is super helpful because it gets the blood going. It keeps, because I think winter is often a time where a lot of us do like, even if we, are the little bit of activity we might have in our lives gets sort of decreases dramatically because you don't want to go outside. You might not be taking walks as much, playing sports, doing that sort of thing that would otherwise get you moving. So exercise, I think, is really important. And reminding yourself too, when you exercise it, like just like you do this with your physical body, your mental needs to be exercised as well, right? You need to also stimulate that as well, rather than just sort of kind of being sedentary, both mentally and physically,
Great point. And my little life hack, because everybody loves life hacks. Okay,
Yeah,
so get
God,
this.
yeah. They're
When
great.
I exercise in the morning, I also listen to motivational material. So
Nice.
killing two birds with one stone there in the
Yeah.
morning, because they say if you win the first hour, you win the day. So like getting in the physical activity to get my body moving, and then also getting in the good stuff, because good stuff in, good stuff out, or garbage in, garbage out. So you got to realize, are you listening to the news or are you listening to motivational material?
I meant to tell you too. This is like sort of on top. I was listening to this thing the other day, and they were talking to it was a research for the R&D department for BBC, and the girl was trying to make basically an extension for your browser for their website, for like the news website, where it would blur out articles based on your mood. So you could slide like a slider, and like if you were in a not in the mood where you wanted to see the news, but you didn't want to see like all the negativity and all that, you slid the slider and
You
it
don't
blurs
see
it out.
anything.
Yeah, right. I know that's all I could think was like there's nothing there, but you know, like you were just saying though, right? Like auditing, your life. I mean, people talk about, the importance of like time management and like, scheduling their time. I mean, you always talk about being a fetishes with like, having that time management, those little blocks all
Yeah.
specified, doing that. And I think, that's true for everything though, right? If you're feel yourself in that mood, especially with seasonal depression, kind of being, checking your mood in the morning, asking yourself, how do I feel? And if you're aware of that, knowing, okay, well, then maybe I shouldn't go on the news today because that's going to make me angry or stressed or depressed or whatever. And it's things that are way outside of my control that I have no way of influencing today. So do I really want to do that now? Maybe not. Maybe do something else this morning, like listening to motivational stuff or listening to something positive, and then, it's seeing how you feel later before you do that, but kind of being more sort of touching base with your own emotions, your own attitude more often throughout the day, I think is hugely important. It's a great way to help, deal with it.
Yeah, you touch on a good point about being intentional about your emotional states. And this is something that's important because like emotions and motions or actions are very, very correlated. Like you can't smile for very long without actually being happy.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can't physically act in a depressed way for very long without being depressed. So like finding that correlation and then looking in your life, like what things are you doing on a regular basis that make you irritated or that get you angry or that get you sad or anything like that, and limiting your exposure to them. Because while you may not think you are able to, you're probably able to a lot more than you think. And you're like, well, but they're friends from childhood. And it's like, well, maybe you should find some different friends. And you're like, but they're family. And it's like, well, maybe you should spend some less time with them. And you're like, but I need to stay informed with the news. And it's like, yeah, maybe 15 minutes a day is enough, you know? So
yeah, being kind of more conscious, more intentional about that, I think is a great point. And I think, too, people have that misconception that emotions are something that happens to you, that like is a reaction to something. And in part it is, but you don't have to respond in a way. You don't have to let it sort of boil over and go out of control. And you're dead right now. It's like, it is amazing how, if you act depressed, you will feel depressed. And you can literally make yourself depressed, or you can make yourself actually energized and happy. And there's like no reason to, I don't know, there's no reason to just be miserable all the time, I think, or at least
okay,
not work on it.
here's another life hack that I have.
All right.
Whenever I'm feeling frustrated or angry and I notice it, I stick a pencil in my mouth like this. Because if you do that, you're forced into a smile. Whereas
Nice.
if you stick one in your mouth like this, like the eraser end, your mouth, and you purse your lips around it, you're forced into a frown. So yeah. So if you put the pencil in long ways through your mouth, it makes you smile. Hold it there for 5 minutes. Chances are you'll just be feeling better afterwards.
Plus, it's also ridiculous. So that's got to help too, right? It's like,
right.
no, but it's funny. I think that's true. It's we really do forget that connection between our sort of like our physiological state and also our mental state, and they're completely connected. You can't separate the two. It's just like, feeling tired and going out and moving about so you get energized again and feeling more awake. It's like it's not rocket science. It really is just life, but it's just we fail so often to do those things that will help. I think that is a big part of it.
Well, because they're hard.
Yeah, they are.
Unfortunately, there's no easy button. I mean, it is fortunate that there's no easy button, but recognizing that there is no easy button. Like, if you want to live a good life, it requires effort. Simple as that.
It is, yeah. And I think you're right. Admitting that's good too. Oh, I wanted to add one more thing too, just for seasonal depression. One thing, I mean, I know a lot of people, it can be helpful too, is just listening to good music. Something you like that's especially upbeat, not, super depressing, but something you like that's upbeat that you can sing to, because it's just a way to sort of get your mind out of that state, to help you sort of get to to get in a better attitude that you can then approach the day. Music, I think, is very helpful. It'd be great. Yeah.
That's a good one. And another one that I wanted to add is find a good friend. And if you don't have one yet, start looking,
Yeah.
So like Danny and I have been doing this every week for a little over a year, and it's helped both of us out tremendously.
Yeah.
Because we used to just meet up every week and we would chat, and we would basically do the same stuff we're doing now, because it'd be like, I'm having problems in my life, I'm feeling seasonal depression or whatever, and we just talk about it with each other. And then eventually we just started doing it on the podcast on YouTube as well. But it's something that if you're not regularly talking with a good friend and connecting on a deep level, you're missing out on something huge, like something that it's one of the things that makes you human. Like this is what it means. We're social animals. We need this. So if you're not doing this, and it's very easy not to do this, like don't get down on yourself if you're not doing this, because
no, it's super easy not to. Yeah.
I would bet that most people are not doing it, but make an effort to start reaching out to people on a regular basis. Like put it on your calendar or have it pop up on your phone that every Tuesday you're going to call up somebody. And even if they don't answer, 5 Tuesdays in a row, once that 6th Tuesday comes around, they'll be like, why does he keep calling me on Tuesday? I might as well answer the phone. So you might just start talking and just, be persistent about it and start making those connections.
It's funny you mentioned that. I was actually just listening to 2 studies that were related, right? One was on, loneliness and having close connections and how that really does make your life better. It makes you like more healthy, more positive because you have somebody that you can actually interact with. But the other one was interesting too, was that, in romantic relationships, we've started to put so much expectations on our partner to fill all these needs, literally everything, right? To be a best friend, to be a romantic partner, to be like our, to be our emotional guy, to be our, everything is placed on this one person. And they were saying, like back in the day, you used to have multiple people that you would go to for these things, right? So you'd have a friend that you might talk to and confide in, and it's outside of your relationship. So you can talk about things that, you're not going to necessarily upset your partner, whatever. And I think that's also speaks to that, right? Is having somebody that's you can really talk to, that you can be honest with, and actually engage with. It makes such a difference. It makes everything so different, and it doesn't have to be it can be outside of that 2-person thing. I think is important to mention too, because I think people put a lot of expectation on that.
And here's a secret, that if you don't have a friend right now, and if you really need to talk with someone, you can pay for a counselor, and they're actually really good at listening.
Yeah, they are.
I've done it a lot. And they are great at listening, and it really helps work through things, because it's not like pretty much every time it wasn't like they told me anything new that I didn't know. It was just I was able to talk with them like I talk with Danny now, and we just talk about things, and then we'd have insights because I'd just be like, oh, I knew that, duh, okay, great.
Another thing too, I think that's also helpful is that if you can't get a friend, like, or if you don't have a friend to talk to right now, if you don't have, or if you can't get a counselor right away or something, journaling is also a great way to do this. It's just literally, it's really about getting the things said in some way, shape, or form, written down, said. You don't have to show anybody, but it's just a way to get it out in the world. And that helps immensely because you get it out of your mind. You put it into words, you put it on paper. And I think that really does make a huge difference. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was going to say, recognize you need to return to it too. I think that's the other thing. We do this every week, right? So it's like one time you'll feel better, but it's not going to, you still got to come back to it. It's like, it's like everything else. It requires repetition, practice, and, kind of affirming again and again the same thing, because that's how we sort of become better, right? That's how we habituate. That's how we practice, how we get to a point where we're beyond whatever is causing us problems or causing us to be stuck.
Yeah, I like it. There's an analogy of tuning a piano. Whereas if you have a piano that hasn't been tuned in a while, when the tuner comes out, they have to tune it. And then they're like, okay, I'll see you next week. And you're like, why? You just tuned it. And it's like, no. I'll see you next week. And then I'll see you 2 weeks after that. And then a month after that. Because the strings haven't been that tight for a while, you tighten them up and then they loosen up on their own. They're just not used to it. They stretch, different stuff like that. And it's the same thing with yourself. Like, it's going to be difficult, but the resources are there. And I think, this is another important part. It's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And you can do it. And you can get through it. And that's the important part. So like having that mentality.
Add to that too? And when you take steps to try and improve it and make it better, it gets less difficult, still difficult, but less difficult because you're actually doing something about it. Yeah. I think those are all important.
Yeah. That's a That's a really good point. There's a good series of books by Martin Seligman. So he wrote Flourish. He also wrote I can't remember the other one, but basically he did a
I'm
whole
on a
bunch
book.
of laboratory studies where it's learned optimism is the name of
Oh,
the
right,
book.
right. Yeah, yeah,
Learned
yeah. Yeah.
optimism. If you've suffered from
Good one.
depression in any type of way, read that book, Learned Optimism, because they've done a whole bunch of laboratory studies where not being able to help yourself, like learned helplessness in animals, shows very similar signs to depression in humans.
Yeah.
And so, while I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, it is a very convincing book, and he has a whole bunch of very good tips for how to overcome it. So that's a great thing.
Well, it makes sense too, right? The more you stay in a mindset where you feel like you can't do anything, where you blame the outside world, because that's what learned helplessness with animals is, right? It's they're in a situation where they're getting harmed, but they can't overcome it because of external factors. So it's like the more you do that, the more you feel powerless, and the more you feel helpless, right, and depressed, and it just perpetuates. As soon as you start taking measures and taking action and doing things on your own, you realize that it's not impossible to overcome this, and all of a sudden things start to change, but you have to do it, and it's very hard to do when you're in that mindset. Especially it's very difficult, but
Mm-hmm.
it is possible to change it. Everything is. I think it's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing too, right? Is you know nothing's permanent, nothing's fixed, everything is temporary and transitory. And I think that's important too, because even right, the seasons will change. No matter what happens this season, it will get better. And I think reminding yourself that too, like I absolutely, it's funny. I get seasonal depression every year, but I love the fall and I love the spring. Even though the fall is the start of it, I like that time of year. I love when the leaves change and trying to remind myself of things that I like in those seasons. Like I do like going out in the snow, taking walks and stuff. So like trying to remind myself of those things that I do like really does help me kind of get through it and recognizing them.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, recognizing the seasonality of it. So like every year after fall comes winter and after winter comes spring. And so like noticing that this isn't the end, this isn't, you know, it's just something that you have to get through and you can do it. There are tons of resources out there. There are people, there are books, there are all types of things.
Did we
One other
mention?
thing.
Oh,
Mhm.
go ahead. I was gonna say, did we mention light therapy? I know
I
you've tried that, right?
briefly. Oh
Okay,
yeah,
yeah,
I love it. I love it. Use
yeah,
it all the time. If you can't get into real sunlight, getting one of those blue lights, and what I would do in the wintertime is just have that thing right on the chair next to me, have it shining in my eyes, and these are the instructions. You put it at like a 30-degree angle or whatever, a few
yeah.
feet away. Have it shining in your eyes as I'm reading my books in the morning and journaling and having coffee. It's a
Nice.
fantastic
Yeah,
way to wake up, and you're getting it because you're supposed to get it for like a half an hour or an hour or whatever it is. And
yeah.
so you're getting it pretty much passively while you're doing your other stuff anyways. And it's just a great way to
Nice.
get it. Mm-hmm.
That's a nice way to do it. Yeah, too, having it at home. Because I know you can also go out and go to those, like, a lot. I know some gyms have them now, things like that, where you can do like the light tanning boots, but they're not the same. They're
Oh,
different,
dude,
right?
I
The
do
ones that
that
are,
too. I've
yeah,
done
yeah.
every winter tanning booths, even with the red lights and everything like that. I have the best tan in the wintertime.
Yeah. But I think that's also right. That's also it too, though. Is like it's also like it took me a long time to realize it too. I think, and I think it speaks to it. But all these things that we do and try to keep trying to combat it and overcome it and correct it, because I think that's the other thing is not giving up. Keep trying new things, and you'll find that thing that works for you. And I think that's the other important thing is it's easy to give up. It's harder a lot of times to keep going, but life is always better when you keep going and
Mm-hmm.
don't give up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because somehow you get through it every year.
Yeah.
Like there's always that moment when it seems the most difficult, the toughest, like it's like you're not going to get through it, and then you just keep on going a little bit more and then you get through it. And I know for me personally, those times when it's been most difficult, it's been the most helpful for me to reach out to friends and to tell them what I'm going through,
Yeah.
because all of them have been super helpful at helping guide me through it. And really, it like almost every season I can reach back to like one conversation that I had that just like and then it was over. Like that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
you make a good point too. When you reach out to others too, not trying to hide what the problem is, just say it. Who cares? Because the funny thing is, like we always worry that our experience is unique. It's not. tons of it, they probably are going through it. Literally, like every time we've talked and one of us is having a problem, it's like it might not be that week. Oftentimes it is that I'm having the same issue, but it's like, it's like somebody's gone through it. It's not a big deal, or they know somebody. So don't even stress about that. Just say it, because it's like you get to the point way quicker.
Yeah, and here's another thing. So some people may be afraid of talking with their friends about this type of stuff. So there's two things that happen when you talk about your friends with this type of stuff. One, you recognize they're not that type of friend and you find other friends.
Yeah,
or two, they're that type of friend and you can talk with them about it. So like either way you win. There literally is no loss in talking with someone about this. So, talking with somebody so that you can get through it.
It also makes your friendship better too, I think, and makes it stronger, right? You get a more mature, better relationship, I think, from it, because it opens the door for them too to also rely on you, which is also a good positive feeling. When you can help somebody else, and just listen even. Yeah.
Definitely. So another thing that I wanted to mention is having faith. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean religious faith. However,
no.
I do notice somewhat of a correlation between the decrease in religious faith and the increase in depression and mental health issues. But these may not be related at all. But having faith in that number one, you'll get through this. Number two, if you choose to, there could be something bigger than you out there. And guess what? It wants the best possible life for itself, and you're part of that. So it wants the best possible life for you. So like having that type of faith in life to help just kind of get you through it. Because I know in some difficult times, just like believing that there's something more than me out there and actually asking for help from that thing, whatever that is for you.
Yeah, a lot of people can share. It's like, great, faith or hope, even just something to help you sort of, that gives you that larger picture that can help you get there, but not a substitute for action, not a substitute for doing things, but a way to help you kind of get there and feel better about it when you're doing it, I think is a good one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's pretty much, I've expended pretty much most of what I do.
Yeah, it's most of what I do too. But they're good, I think. Go ahead. Yeah.
Here's one more thing that I was thinking about. The expectation. So we talked about this first, being prepared for
it. Yeah.
We talked about being prepared for it. But also, you have to look at it in the other light. A lot of people expect to have seasonal depression. And, like they've shown that you're like 11 times more susceptible to get sick when you're in a bad mind state. Mm-hmm. And so like if you're expecting to get it, you're going to start looking for signs of it. And then your mind will do what your mind does and convince you that you have it. Yeah. So this is kind of like a meta thing. And it may not work at all.
It's absolutely true though.
Yeah, but this is something that, if you're expecting to get it, and if you're like, this is my seasonal depression, and if you really like associate with that strongly, then it's going to happen. But if you're like, this is something that I may or may not have to deal with this year, it may be, I've experienced it previously. It may or may not happen in my future. But if it does, I know I have all these resources. I have all these people who can help, all these different things I can do. So let's have the best season I can have. Then, I think that's a pretty good way to look at it.
You're prepared for it. You don't have to worry about it. I think you're right though, because our brains are super powerful and they create the world. And when we have expectations of things, they will create that world with those things in it, right? You look for reasons, you justify it. I think that's a great point, though. It's a good one to, I think, end on, because it is probably one of the most important, which is be prepared and don't expect it to happen, right? So be prepared for it either way.
And there's one more thing that popped into my mind as well. Unresolved life issues. I think that can cause a lot of difficulties, because I noticed that like when I had a lot of outstanding student debt, that weighed on me heavily and like was a very, very difficult mental thing to overcome for me. And also like other things, like maybe
relationship
lying
problems,
and
right?
Relationship
or holding
problems.
on to things, not dealing with them outright. Yeah, dude, totally. I agree with you. Yeah.
all of these things because they're literally psychological burdens on us. And during the summertime when everybody's having fun and meeting up with friends, the sun's shining, the flowers are blooming, it's okay to just kind of carry them along. But once the sun is out a little bit less and you really don't see it because you're working the whole entire day while the sun's out and it's just a long winter ahead of you, all of a sudden those things start weighing on you. So it's a good opportunity to at the very least recognize these things, because recognizing them is kind of the first step. And literally, like, once you recognize that they're there and you realize that you want to get over them, particularly if you write down that you plan on getting over it, it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
That's
the hard part's out of the way.
yeah. And then you just need to wait, and maybe take some action, and it'll resolve eventually. But those types of psychological burdens, I think those can also contribute a lot to the seasonal depressions and just like the feeling of not being good. Because
they contribute a lot too, because also they contribute at that sense of helplessness, hopelessness, and that weight, right? Like you said, I mean, that's why we always use that expression, the weight was lifted off my shoulders, right? Because it's like you feel lighter. It's like, oh, I dealt with something. I feel like, I dealt with one of these problems. I think that's a good one. Yeah. You gotta get those things out of the way and deal with them, and it's a huge one.
And here's a life hack.
Go ahead.
I just love to give everybody life hacks, because if I do something that kind of works, why not? Anytime there's a water source, because like water draws stuff away. So anytime there's a water source, like particularly a waterfall or a stream or something like that, I just like to imagine taking all of my worries and all the things that are weighing on me and just letting them go to the water, and just being like, and then there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and then just let them go and let go of my worries. And I found, just for that moment, for a few seconds, it's like, I don't have to carry this. Awesome.
Well, it's good. I was gonna say, because there's a lot of meditative practices that incorporate stuff like that, like breathing in good, exhaling the bad, right? Getting rid of the bad. And when you do that too, even just for that moment, it lightens you and it makes it easier to see clearly what you need to do or how to do it or how to, move forward or just be in a good mood. I think, we can just enjoy ourselves. I think sometimes it's just slowing down, or it's just being more aware is probably the most crucial thing, and aware of how we feel and how we are. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good helpful tips though for dealing with seasonal depression, because it is a bitch.
Yeah, right. You have any other ones you wanted to mention?
I mean, I was just thinking about this, but my last one, and this is kind of like maybe just, I don't know, I like doing it, but starting to, like, I have a picture of the moon here, if you can, like, starting to enjoy the nighttime, the night sky. I like doing that, whether it's taking pictures, there's all those good apps, you can identify constellations, but just giving yourself an excuse to go outside at night and kind of enjoy it, I think really helps, because you can kind of get excited about it and all, and it can kind of help you also have some activity to do that's outside during this time and help you get through it. One of my favorite things.
Yeah, that's a great one, because especially in the wintertime, the nights are like so crisp, and especially if you can see the stars and like see your breath, it really is like quite an experiential experience to be out at nighttime in the winter.
Well, it's fun too, because you could also look online easily and find out, like, if there's meteor showers and stuff, and if there's a solar, lunar eclipse or something, and you can kind of plan stuff and have something to look forward to at night, which is also nice. So some other good one.
Great. So all in all, I think we've covered a whole bunch of great topics for a seasonal depression user's guide. So Doug. So hopefully this season can be your best one, because remember, you're not alone in this. A lot of people experience it, a lot of people go through it, but we can all get better and better at dealing with it. So guys, thank you so much for joining us today with the Existential Stoic podcast. Make sure to listen on the podcast if you're driving somewhere, or watch on YouTube if you're at home. We will see you guys later. Join us midweek for a quick fix. I'm Randy. That's my buddy Danny, and we'll catch you later.
Later, Randy.